Is this the future of hobbyist 3D printing? Ever since Bambu came out with their printer, these Core XY enclosed printers have been hitting the market like crazy. I have two of the more popular models here, so let's compare them and see which one's better. So software. Which printer has a better software? It's kind of an irrelevant question since you can use pretty much any software you like with both printers. But for the standalone software that each one provides, I think the Qidi Slicer has the edge here. The Slicer's fine, I haven't had any issues with it. It does feel a little jumbled and it takes more clicks, I feel like, than it needs to. But overall, it's a decent slicer. Again, no problems. Creality Slicer, on the other hand, or Creality Print, not a fan. I used it right away, same with this one, just to learn it and see what they offered with their given slicer. And it's just, I had weird problems with it, and then eventually it just stopped printing. I would send a file to it, and it would like move around like it had a clog, but there was no clog. So after 3 times doing that, I ended up running a file that was pre-saved in the printer that I knew would run. That file ran great, so I tried to send a file from here again, and I even reverted back to the previous update thinking that was the issue, and it did the same exact thing. So I'm not sure why it wouldn't print with the Creality Slicer. I then downloaded Orca Slicer, and the first print I sent to it printed flawlessly. So I never looked back, and I just stopped using Creality Print like completely. And since I like Orca Slicer so much, since it's an offshoot of Bambu and it's just my preferred slicer, again, it doesn't really matter. Kira prints fine if that's what you like. But I now run Orca Slicer on both printers, just to kind of consolidate my printers so I don't have to have a bunch of slicers on my computer. So this is Orca. I'll show you a few things in here. So you can connect the printers to Orca. You just type in the URL here, and then you go over to device. And there's a bunch of information in here where you can send your files back and forth over Wi-Fi. I have 200 hours of print time on here. Well, 178 hours of actual print time. And then calibrations. And then here's the bed mesh of the Qidi. And then here's the Creality, same thing. You just add the profile into here. And here shows you the camera, all this stuff. Here's the bed mesh for the K1 Max. And then my only complaint is I have to export G-code with the Creality. I don't know why, but I have to export G-code. You just save it. Okay, whatever. And then you have to import it like this. And then I have to go to the printer and push print. But with the Qidi, I can just come up here and go to print, and it'll send it and print it. Not sure why. And then I don't know where else to find this, but I found this in the About section. It says I have about 12 days of print time, which comes out to about 300 hours on the K1 Max. And then for print size, the K1 prints 300 by 300 by 300 millimeters. I think them numbers aren't exact, but that's what they have on the website. And then the X Max 3 is 325 by 325 by 315. And then the speeds are essentially the same based to their internet specs. But these are both very big printers. The Bambu X1C is 256 by 256 by 256, I think. So these are both very big printers, and they're bigger than the Bambu. So if that's what you're looking for, these will no doubt have the edge as they're just bigger printers. So this thing is huge though. It weighs a lot, and it's just a big giant printer. I honestly call it the magic microwave. And this one's more sleek and clean, but they also cram too much into here, which I had to print this top piece over here, and it really crams that tube down. This one has plenty of space up in here, so it's big and it's kind of ugly, but it doesn't really matter what it looks like. I do think this printer does look better, but how do they print? That's all that matters to me. Just to show you the sheer size of this thing. Pick that up and don't wreck my prints.
There's too much stuff.
Okay, you're done.
It's so big.
So I just threw filament in here. We're gonna print a giant Lego man. And I just so happen to have some Hyper PLA in blue. So this is sliced in Orca, just stock Hyper PLA settings. And it took 37 minutes. This is my generic PLA setting in Orca for the Qidi. And this is slightly modified. It's not totally plain. We did have a little warping, and this took 35 minutes. I mean, other than the warping, giving it a little bit of a smoosh on the back. Look how good that looks. Yeah, that looks great. And then this is the Hyper PLA, Creality PLA. You see, it's got a little bit of that waviness. But overall, the Benchy looks good, so I'll probably keep these settings. I'm probably gonna slow it down a little bit, just to kind of hopefully smooth that out. Okay, so here's the giant Lego body. As you can see, it looks pretty dang good. I did have a little warping, so you can see there's some areas where you can kind of see like the compression of all this. And then you can see these little lines. So that's the problem I was running into on this first one. I printed this first one here. It's hard to focus, but you can see I'm getting these little lines at the start and stop points. That essentially looks like this, but more excessive. And what I did was I adjusted the max flow rate, which I printed this test here in Orca, and it's pretty easy to do and figure out. So I lowered the max flow rate and I got way better results. But then I started getting it again up here and on top of here. So now I'll lower the max flow rate, probably one bump, and then I'll also lower the pressure advance. You can see the layer lines in the right, just in the light just right. So I didn't get any warping on this one. So I actually peeled it up a tiny bit on there. Okay, let's see how these supports come off. Pretty good. That don't look the best. But overall the supports came off pretty easy. Hopefully you can hear me, the CNC is running, but we're gonna print the hands and the head in the K1 Max. All right, so look how good this yellow Benchy works. Looks. Minus the stringing. This thing looks great. So I've had a lot better results with PLA Plus versus the regular PLA on both machines. I think it's just kind of a flow thing. But yeah, let's get printing. When I started printing the hands, I did get a clog. I cleared the clog and it didn't have any issues past that, but it's something to mention as I was printing this Lego man. I've only had 2 clogs total with this machine, so it's not really a huge issue, but it did happen and worth a mention. As I was printing the arms in the X Max 3, I did run out of filament about a third of the way up, and the filament sensor did fail, so I did have to restart the print. It's only happened once, so I'm not sure if that's an issue or just a one-time thing. And after I did a little more tuning, you can see these just look beautiful. Hardly any defects. And this is the file I used for this. I am not selling these, I made this for my friend. Please don't sue me, Lego. The arms just didn't fit in the sockets and I was afraid to force it, so I tried sanding them a little bit. That didn't work, and then I ended up just using a heat gun, and that got them in there. Be careful though, because it does not take much heat with the PLA. Brief interruption. So as I was printing the Lego head in the K1 Max, I was using the heat gun to warm up the socket to pop it into the body, and I didn't realize it was on the same circuit as the printer and the filament dryer and all that, and it popped the breaker. And this is the only roll I had of this yellow. So I panicked and didn't record any of it. I ran over to the breaker box, flipped the breaker on, and then I was just like hoping that it had some sort of resume feature, and it did. A little window popped up and it was like, would you like to resume print to where it left off? So that huge. I don't know about the other printers, I've never had that happen before, but that is a super awesome feature that they have in this. The only issue I could see with that is if it completely cools down and the power doesn't get turned on fast enough and the plate starts to release the print, and then you'd have issues. But you can't even really tell where it let off. It was like somewhere around here, but good job, Creality. I would assume if Creality has it, the other ones do, but I don't know. And because he's so large, the tolerances are off, which is why I had to heat up the joints. I added a little tape here just so this fit more snug. And then because the arms were so loose, I put some zip ties in there and added a little bit of super glue. So there's a few tips if you're gonna make one. But ooh, he looked good. Okay, so now we're gonna go over each individual features of the machines. So this is the Qidi display. And this is the Creality display. Very similar to the Bamboos. I do prefer the Creality display over this one. It's just, the touch is a little cleaner and it just looks a little better in my opinion. And then this also feels like the navigation of the Creality is just better in my opinion. It's just easier to navigate, but everything you need is in here. Okay, so I'm gonna have to start a print to show this. But okay, here, this is all I need. So what's super awesome about this printer is I can adjust the flow rate, the Z level, and everything right in here as it's printing. So when you're printing that first layer, if you see there's not enough squish or the nozzle's too far or high, you can adjust that right in here. Versus in here, you really can't. I don't have to start it. Well, I guess I can start one for the sake of it. There's no filament in here. So in here, all I can really adjust is the temp and the bed temp. I can't adjust all these cool things on the fly. So I really appreciate this feature in here. So we're gonna run a first layer test on both printers just to give you a visible representation of what's going on, and it'll really highlight the biggest downfall of this printer, and I'm curious to see how this printer does. I highly recommend you to do this yourself with your printer to see what's going on with that first layer, and hopefully it'll help you understand the Z height of your printer. You can get this file in printables or pretty much anywhere. Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and restart this one, and here's my example here. You can already see not enough squish over there. And over there, it's looking a little better. So I'm just gonna restart it and run the test again. This one, looking just fine. So I tweaked the Z offset a little bit lower, like a tiny amount. And there you can see there's not enough squish, didn't stick there. And then over here, there's too much squish and it's too close. So I'm gonna tweak the offset a little bit more and hopefully third time's the charm, and we'll see how this looks. Let's take a look. This looks pretty good for the K1 Max. I have not leveled anything. I do need to level the K1 Max. This one's starting to release as I had to print 3 of those on the K1 Max. Okay, so here is a little low, but the rest of this looks pretty dang good. So other than this spot, the rest looks, I'd say, dang near perfect. Okay. Then the Creality. Too low, too low, too low. Over here, we're getting all right. That looks pretty decent, pretty decent. So this is the third one I printed. I should have did it with the smooth plate just to see if it looked any different. But again, I printed some beautiful things on the K1 Max. It's just the first layer is pretty annoying, and 2 out of 10 prints, I got to restart it and let it recalibrate and do its thing. It's kind of just a crapshoot with the K1 Max bed leveling. And then here's the other one. This one had too much smoosh. And there wasn't enough, wasn't enough, wasn't enough. Too much, too much. That one's pretty good. So for filament loading, I run the filament dryer on the side just because it has it on the back. This is just on the back. It's just the thing you set the roll on and it feeds into it. This one, on the other hand, I'll show a video of this, but this, in my opinion, is a horrible design. You have to reach back there, take this off, reach in there, load this filament in there all weird like, and I have it over there against the wall, and it's just a huge pain. After this video, I'm gonna take a filament dryer and I'll just run it off the side here because this is just a huge miss, in my opinion. And I'm gonna show you why I think this is such a bad design. So most people are gonna have their printer up against a wall like this, and I gotta pull this out off the shelf a little bit, pop the cap off, pull out the filament, and then getting it back in there is just very difficult. After you do it a few times, it does get easier, but then I ended up getting the filament wrapped around itself, and it's just kind of a mess. After this video, I'm just going to run a filament dryer on the side, and that should solve this problem. So how much does each printer cost? The Qidi X Max 3 cost $869 US on their website right now. The K1 Max is $900 on the Creality website right now. I have seen these for super cheap, like $200-300 off. I even seen people get them at Micro Center for like $200 being like a floor model. They also run a bunch of sales like Black Friday and any major holiday. They have great deals on these things. Qidi, I'm not exactly sure if they run as many sales as the Creality. But we do have a 5% off code in the description if you're interested in either one of these printers. These were provided to me by each company, no contract, no pay, just my honest opinion. Full disclosure. So the Qidi just feels cheaper. Again, as long as it prints good, I don't care. But the door's plastic, this won't break. All this is just plastic. You can see up here, plastic top. This is glass, and the sides are plastic. This just looks like a cleaner printer in my opinion. Again, they crammed, I told you to stop. So again, they crammed too much in here, and it's just, I had to print this thing here because it ended up cramping this tube. Same with this. This all just drags on this Core XY rail. So again, they just crammed too much in there, but it does look like a clean printer. So I also have the K1C, and you can see they've made a lot of improvements on this one. I will do a full video on this here shortly. It's been sitting over here collecting a little bit of dust the last couple days. But you can see they added this top on here, which I believe they did with the first generation, or the third rendition of that machine. So this is nice, and also they fixed all this stuff. They put a different extruder on there. It doesn't rub on the rail anymore. But again, I wish it was just a little taller and you didn't need this big lid, but no big deal. This is the textured plate that came with the machine. And then this machine came with the smooth plate. I bought this one extra. I think it was like $30. So one thing that this printer has that this printer does not have is a heated chamber. You can see the heater back here, which just allows you to print more difficult filaments a little easier and just gives you a little larger range of stuff you can print. That's not something I use or have I ever used, but it's something that this one has that this one doesn't. And something that this one has that this one does not have is the LiDAR. This machine over here does not have LiDAR, and this one does. I'm not exactly sure how much the LiDAR actually does for the printer. It does detect things on the work surface very well, because it does this little splurge right here where it just does like that little calibration or whatever it does. And if I don't take that off, it alerts me every time on the screen that the bed is not clear. So here's one thing they added that's pretty cool that does involve the LiDAR. So I have used this before and it does work pretty well. So you can actually cancel out things that are on the plate. So say you're printing 8 things and 2 of them pop off, you can just cancel out those 2 things and not have to restart the entire print. I really wish I could detect spaghetti failures midway through the print. I currently don't think it does, but hopefully they can add that in the future. Another feature that the Creality has over the Qidi is it has this camera here, so you can view it as it's printing and doing all that. This machine does not have a camera. I'm assuming they offer one. You could probably also just add one to it. It's not really something I use because my shop is on a separate internet than my home, so I can't really view it. I believe you can with the app, but I heard the app for this was awful. The Bamboo, on the other hand, the app is great and you can open it up and watch it print. So like if I'm in the house and I want to come out here and check on the prints, I got to run out here quick and make sure that these things are still printing fine before I go to bed. And then that one I could just pull up the app and check. So let's take a look at a bunch of things that are printed with each machine. So I printed a Super Bowl trophy, which you can see it looks pretty dang good. Some layer lines on there, but overall, it's a nice looking print. Lombardi trophy for the win. Then I printed this Predator mask before I printed this. So this was just the stock profile. And as you can see, there's some weird stuff. I ended up doing a pressure advance and a max flow rate test to clear that up on that. But you can see overall, it looks pretty good. And this is the big mask printed inside of here. The supports came off pretty rough. But overall, if you were to sand this and paint this, it would look pretty dang good. And then I used the stock silk profiles on these. printed in the X Max 3. You can see how clean those are. Again, profile or the supports need a little work. And then this one, the support failed on the bottom, as you can see, but it's a good looking print. And then I printed this moon on here, and I printed the legs on the K1 Max. And then I printed this Spider-Man helmet. I got all these files off printables. None of these are mine. This looks really good. The eyepieces didn't turn out that good, but it was just the stock profile with no tweaking. And then one of the bigger issues on this machine is the ringing, or the VFAs. Then I printed a series of the Squid Game masks. They're a little dusty, but looks really good. Here's the other Squid Game worker mask, printed on the K1. All these were on the K1 Max. And then the head, the hands, K1 Max. The body, arms, X Max 3. The legs, K1 Max. But back here, you can see again, it has that ringing and the VFAs. I don't really have that issue as much with the X Max 3. This was also printed on the K1 Max. As you can see, both printers have their own quirks. This one, my biggest complaint is the first layer issue. Other than that, I don't have many complaints. This one, the biggest complaint is the Tupperware deal on the back, but that can easily be fixed by a dryer on the side. And both printers can print beautifully. They're gonna need a little bit of tweaking and modifying other profiles, but you can also go to the Facebook groups of each printer and see what other people are using for filament types, and then find out what fits your needs best. You could also use other people's print profiles. You can find those on YouTube, Facebook groups, wherever. But I highly recommend you go on YouTube or just tinker around with yourself and learn these different calibrations to help tune the filament and understand the first layer and all that. And once you figure out each filament, it's gonna vary from color to color and brand to brand. But once that filament's dialed, as long as it's dry, you're good to go. And just to show you how easy this is, you can do this in pretty much any slicer. You come up to calibration and you run these. So let's just do max flow rate. Okay, you can learn what all this means later. But here you go. And that's just gonna generate that. And then to understand it, you can go on YouTube or you can go over to tutorial and it will explain what all the ins and outs of all this stuff means. But great stuff to learn, highly recommend it. So what printer would I buy between these two? So again, I like Bamboo. I think Bamboo printers are great. And you can get the P1S now for like $1,000 with the AMS, but that's also a smaller printer. These are both printers that are larger than that. And another downfall of the Bamboo is it's a closed sourced system. You can't root it and go in there and mess with a bunch of stuff. For me, that doesn't matter because I just want it to print good and that's it. These are both open source. You can root them and do whatever you want to do with them. We'll say they're both $900. If I was going to spend $900, I would buy the Qidi X3 Max. I just think it's a better printer. It's just a little more reliable and less tinkering. And you can see in the profiles, you tweak a little bit, you can get some pretty clean prints. The K1 Max is a good printer too, I think. I haven't had nearly as many problems as other people with this printer. This first layer is my biggest complaint. And you can get these things on sale all the time. So again, for like, if you can get it for like $600 or find it used, that's a good deal. But again, if I was to only choose between these two printers, I would go with the Qidi X Max 3. It's just a pretty good, reliable printer and less tinkering than this one.